Lighter ones.
Lighter.
As Marcia said, I graduated in 1980. My name's Mary Ryan Hotchkiss now. At that time it was Mary Ryan. And so I may know some things about Jim that the rest of you might not know. It occurs to me I forgot my notes. Mary.
This is going to go on for a while.
Who's next?
I forgot my, where am I? I forgot my.
Okay, so 1980 was only a few years after the first Earth Day. But I do want to point out that Jim was always very ecological. He was very concerned about his consumption. So he would use a pencil like this to write his many publications. So, you know, he would keep going on with it until the pencil would just about disappear. And of course, for 521 chemistry, he had a little red pencil also. So I'm surprised it didn't totally disappear with all of the red marks that he made on my test. I don't know about the rest of you.
You were the only one.
And he was very thrifty. Early in my graduate studies, I wrecked a little pellicle beam splitter. So he saved it. You know, you never know when you might need a wrecked beam splitter. So 2 years later, he presented that pellicle to me with a little message: never model a photon with your finger. So I learned some years after I graduated, when we visited with him, that he was also a civil rights activist. Now that really appeals to me now, because in my graduate career I finally learned, okay, now I've supported myself, what am I going to do to improve the world? So I found out that at the time, Sally didn't even know this, that when he was an undergraduate student in the 60s, some of you children may not recall, but in the 60s, it wasn't assured that black people were always going to get their rights. But Jim and some of his friends decided to attend a court trial of a black student so that the judge and the people in the court would know that white people were watching and that this student would get appropriate treatment. I thought that was really neat. In the 60s he would do that. Now, to us, Jim always seemed really self-confident. He could make results sound so good at a conference, you know, even things that I thought, is that my research? Those results sounded just a little shaky. But one time he told us something that maybe gave me a little insight of how he really felt. He was getting ready to go on vacation. And he came in and told us that morning before he went on vacation that he had a dream the night before. In that dream, he came back from vacation and his office was gone. There was no door, there was no office, the department hadn't heard of him, his graduate students didn't remember him. But I just want to assure him that, Jim, we will never forget you. Thank you for all you have done for us. You are totally unforgettable. I especially remember the great cookies at your group meetings. Thank you. Thank you for being a great professor. Thank you for a great party today. It's yours, my child.
Thank you, Mary. And next, we're going to hear from Lamar Dewall. He had the opportunity, I guess, the wonderful opportunity to work in Jim's lab. It was just Lamar, Cecilia, Socorro, and I. So he had to deal with a lot. I'm sure he has some special stories to share.
Well, I'm not much of a public speaker. I haven't had enough opportunity to do that, but so I'm only up here because I was given an offer I couldn't refuse from people I can't name. But the other thing is that I'm not really into roasting people. I wouldn't want to be embarrassed publicly by people, so I can't really see.
All I'm worried about.
I agree.
Well, I understand that everybody's here to hear something funny and to laugh at it, so I brought some jokes. Keep in mind that these have nothing to do with Jim. They have to do with senior texting codes. So these are things that, if you're texting for folks your age type of thing. So one of the things that we used to talk about a lot was BYOB. Now it means bring your own brand. Followed closely by OMG, which means oh my, gas. The younger folks say, friends with benefits, FWB, is now friends with bifocals. Talk to later is now talk to louder. By the way, BTW is bring the wheelchair. LOL, living on Lipitor. TGIF, that was one we had a lot to say about. TGI, bring your own, thank God it's 4 o'clock for the early bird special. FYI, for your indigestion. Forgot where I was is FWIW. IMHO, which is, in my humble opinion, is my hearing aid on.
None of that has anything to do with Jim.
Nothing. Let's say about that. So, I do have one Jim story first. One time there was a number of us, I think about 3 of us, and I forget which lab we were in, but we were setting up some sort of I think it was atomic emission, atomic absorption experiment. We had a hydrogen flame lit going on in the lab. And Jim comes in, walks into the lab, and he sees this as an opportunity to teach his graduate students safety, which I realized in my 3-year career that that's a really important thing to learn. So it was probably a good instinct to do. And he proceeds to tell us that hydrogen flames are very dangerous because you can't really tell that they're on. And he emphasizes this point by pointing his finger into the flame. Now, I know it was in the flame because it turned orange. So, to this day, I do not understand if that was his way of telling flames were lit. I haven't had the guts to try it myself. But he didn't say anything. He just got up, kind of like you were saying. He just got up with a stoic look on his face. And from then on, anytime I see that stoic look on his face, I knew I did something extremely goofy, even painfully goofy. I took the opportunity, though, standing up here, to do this roast, if you will, mainly to thank you, mainly for your patience. I don't know that I set the record for PhD length, but I certainly tried to. For all your hard work, in grading all those papers, and especially the ones that got
So
very
I
red.
beat you to that.
And also, thank you for all the things that you taught me about analytical chemistry and just scientific thinking, and been able to leverage that into a 30-year career that I've really enjoyed. So thank you very much.
So next to speak is a colleague, somebody who started the same year I did, in 1980. Now, Jim, once we chose him as a professor, kind of said, like you to call me Jim. Well, this person never, ever, ever, ever called him Jim. Until 2 weeks ago, right? It took her 2 weeks ago. She finally decided that maybe she could call him Jim. So, to speak about Dr. Ingle, would be Socorro Montalvo.
5 minutes, Carl.
Okay, so he's gonna help me with some pictures.
Is there another, oh, can we remove this one?
Yeah.
Can we remove this one? I don't know.
Yeah, I was kidding.
Oh, there's another one. Okay.
All right, I'm gonna start talking so he can do that.
Oh, maybe I know. how
So
to do
we're
this.
gonna talk about gene
So talk into the
qualities.
microphone.
Really?
Yes.
You're the hearing aid.
You're really gonna hear what I have to say. Okay. So we're gonna talk about gene qualities, and like Marshall said, and Cecilia was mentioning this morning, for somebody from Dominican Republic, somebody like a professor in Oregon State, that was really huge. So I could never say Jim to him until like maybe a week ago that they called me personally, and he actually said, "Can you call me Jim?" And I said, "Okay." But he was always Dr. Ingle. So the most important thing is that when we came here, we already had 2 scholarships to go to a California stay in Fullerton. And we came here only for a year to study English. But as you can see in the administration building and walking to go to the ELI, we met Jim and Dr. Kruger and fell in love with Corvallis. So Roberto and I decided to stay, and I think nobody knew that, because actually we were supposed to go to California. Now, the most important part is that I'm a hugger, so I hug people. And the first thing that I did when I met him and something went right with the lab, I just jumped on him and said, "It worked!" And Cecilia, he froze. He was like this. There was no breathing. And Cecilia tapped me in the shoulder and said, "We don't do that here." Qualities that I really appreciated. He was always sharing. As you can see, all these parties, he was part of it. He went to parties. Now, the biggest surprise for me was that for my baby shower, I thought it was going to be all girls. We were going to make all these jokes and all these games. And here I see Jim and Dr. Kruger, and I'm like, and all the guys, and I'm like, what is this? I don't understand this country. But he was sweet enough to go and be there. Now, can you tell that I have changed? Right? All right, so at any rate, I brought that picture to tell another quality that he had. My research was very repetitive. I had to really concentrate on putting all these chemicals and putting it there. And he had the bad quality of coming behind me, you remember this, Martha, and just going very quiet. How are you doing, Socorro? I come from a country that you can mug every quarter of the street. So I told him that day, please don't ever come from the back. That was another frozen moment. He just froze. He couldn't believe he had done that to me. But another quality, according to Dr. Westphal, did you remember me, by the way? According to Dr. Westphal, Marsha, Tim, Claudia and I work too much together. We share labs, we got together writing everything up, so the labs would always look very much the same. But we worked together, we didn't copy each other. So we became the famous four because we had to be competitive. But to Jim, it didn't matter. It was like we were normal, we were just okay. That doesn't matter that we didn't compete, so that was really sweet, but we enjoyed that. Another quality is that he went to games, that's Roberto, and behind is Jim playing baseball. In the bottom, he gave us time for us to pursue different things, and we had a band, Roberto and I. So we play at church and other endeavors, and we had time. That's why maybe it took me a little longer to go out. And anyways, his patients went ahead into the first picture you see. I don't know, Lamar, if you remember this, but Cecilia or you have read a book about the 30-year-old crisis. And we were 27. And we spent hours talking about being 30. You remember Cecilia? And because when we're 30, we're going to conquer the world. And these are the people, we were serious. Yes. And then one day, Jim comes in and says, okay, I think I heard enough. And I'm going to tell you something. And am I going to worry about your research or about my students worrying about being 30? Do you remember that?
No.
Yes. So that day, that conversation was over. He went into weddings. And it is amazing that most of the girlfriends are now the 30-year-old wives in that picture.
31.
That is really sweet, and he was always there. Next. He also encouraged us to be part of different associations, go ahead and tell our research everywhere. And he was very patient in that I was part with Dr. Westphal of the safety committee. Imagine me being safety. So there was one time where I didn't tell anybody anything, but I bought some methylthiol DMSO because I said, okay, if I'm working with hydroxyl compounds, let's try sulfur. And just got into the hood. Those things, as soon as I open it, flew, they disappeared. And 10 seconds later, I have Dr. Westphal, Dr. Schuyler, and Jim rushing into the lab saying, what have you done? Because that smell penetrated the whole floor. And we had to evacuate the floor. The second problem was that I wanted to brominate, alpha brominate a carboxylic acid. So I talked to Jan Kamak, in organic chemistry. And I said, since you have all the distillation set up, I need to brominate this compound. She said, okay, no problem. To make a story short, the bromine didn't stay liquid in ice like I expected. So that thing blew up, went on to the ceiling. Two professors came in, and John and I spent the whole night at the emergency room because the doctors were scared that we brominated our lungs. So after those two things, he was very patient. I don't remember that he yelled or did anything, but I was supposed to ask, and Jim was supposed to sign even the still water for it. So I really appreciated that I didn't get this bar, or I wasn't expelled, but he was really sweet and kept me going. There was a bomb scare. Do you remember that one time? That maybe some of you maybe have left. But there was a year that one of the students from, I think, Big Meyer came to the room and said, there's a bomb scare, we gotta leave. And I said, okay, you all leave, I'll be in charge of Jim. So everybody had left, but I had done so much work with my thesis already that I went very calm. And I said, Jim, where are all my papers? So we spent like about maybe 10-15 minutes getting all my books and all the CDs, floppy disks. And when he had everything ready, then I said, okay, we gotta go because there's a bomb. Everybody's out, and Jim and I are very nicely getting out of the building.